about the books that I want to read in the month of February. I'm really happy with how my TBR and my reading in general went in January. So in February, I want to stick with roughly the same setup, and that was about 10 physical books that I want to read with one Libro FM audiobook from their ALC program. Now, one thing I didn't want to do is to carry over books that I hadn't read from the previous month's TBR into new TBRs. At least not automatically. I just knew that books would end up languishing there and just making me feel bad about myself. The one book that I am making an exception for, at least this time, is The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels by Janice Hallett. Now, the reason that I was unable to read this in January is because I couldn't get my hands on it. The publication date for Australia just kept getting pushed back, basically. I think it's still not technically being published until February the 14th, but I was able to get my hands on this copy, so it is a book that I would like to try and get to in February. This is, of course, Janice Hallett's new mystery release. In January, I read The Twyford Code, which I honestly didn't really love, but I still felt like so many aspects of it were so unique and impressive of themselves that I did still want to give this a go. Especially as Janice Hallett seems to be quite a popular name in the mystery genre. And with me getting more into mystery, I just feel like it's something I should experience. And I want to give her one last go. So her new release, I feel like this is the time to do it. This next book has mostly been picked for me. I mentioned in a video recently that I want to try and read 10 big books on my shelf in the year of 2023, and that I also would like my patrons to help choose which book that is each month. For February, I gave them 3 choices of either The Sword of Kygon, The Winter Garden, or The Jasmine Throne, and they chose The Winter Garden by Alexandra Bell. This book is 519 pages, so it's pretty chunky, especially for a person like me who is scared of big books. But we are overcoming that fear in 2023, and I'm also going to be vlogging my experience of reading this one, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. This is an historical fantasy novel about a magical garden that is only accessible to people who are specifically invited, and only at 13 o'clock on particular nights. To be honest, I have already started. I read the prologue last night and I'm really excited about it. The next lot of books are books in series that I'm currently working on. The first is A Second Chance by Jodie Taylor. This is the third in the Chronicles of St. Mary series. This is a rompy, ridiculous time travel sci-fi series where archaeologists and historians travel back in time to witness historical events as they happened. And although they are supposed to be impartial observers only, obviously things get messy and they usually end up involved somehow. I didn't love the second book as much as I loved the first. There was one particular choice made by a character that did feel a little bit icky, and on top of that, the romance throughout, I just didn't really like how it was handled as much as I did in the first. I'm hoping though we can pick up steam again with the third installment. Also, I haven't really included it within my 10, but I will also aim to read the next short story in the St. Mary's Chronicles. Basically, as far as I can tell, Jodie Taylor kind of writes roughly one novel in the series every year, as well as one short story in the series. The short stories are more for fans, like you don't necessarily have to read them, but my aim is to read a book and the following short story every month. So that's my goal. The next book is Within the Sanctuary of Wings by Marie Brennan. This is the 5th book in the Lady Trent memoirs. And I think this is technically the last book in the series proper. There is another book that's kind of like a companion book. And if you watched any of my videos last month, you'll know that the previous installment was both my favorite book of the month last year and definitely my favorite book in the series so far. So I'm both excited and kind of nervous to be getting to the 5th book in February. I absolutely adore this series, and in particular the character of Lady Trent, like just obsessed. Then of course, Natsume's Book of Friends, I'm up to volume 10. As with last month, I definitely want to get to at least one volume, but I hope to get to more in February. I love this series, and I especially love it as a bit of a palate cleanser throughout the month. I just like to read it when I'm kind of like not quite in the mood for reading, but I know that reading will make me feel better. Each of these volumes takes me about 45 minutes to an hour to read, which is just perfect. You know, if I've finished a book earlier in the day, but I want to read something before bed, like it's just, I love having this series and I really enjoy the story too. Then I have 2 proofs, books that are being released in February that I want to get to for work. The first is The Hotel Witch. This is a middle grade story that I think is being released at the end of February. Apparently this is a magical tale of courage, love, and the power of imagining possibilities. I love that here on the proof cover, there's a couple of quotes from children who are like the target demographic of this book. A magical story with amazing characters, including a talking cat. I couldn't put the book down. Alex, age 12. I love a book with a talking cat most of the time. Sometimes the simplest spells can be the most powerful. It seems quite whimsical and fun. I'm looking forward to it. Then I have a proof for Nightbirds by Kate J. Armstrong. This is a YA historical fantasy, and I think it's a debut by a Melbourne author as well. An intoxic combination of magic, thrilling decadence, and simmering female anger set in a 1920s tinted fantasy world bursting with secrets, intrigue, and upheaval. Apparently the author is a podcaster. I don't know anything about that, but this book, I don't know, it intrigued me. It's pretty chunky, but I wanted to give it a go. And I'm hoping that it's great so that I can happily hand sell it to readers at work. Then for something completely different, I'm going to read Finlay Donovan is Killing It. Last month I did a reading vlog reading 5 different mysteries just to get a sense of the genre and what I might be into. And I've just heard so much about Finlay Donovan that I'm so curious. I do also already have the second one, so I'm hoping this goes well, and who knows, maybe I'll get to both in the month of February. And this is another one that I'm planning on vlogging this month, so stay tuned for that if you want to hear my thoughts. Then to round out this list, I wanted to throw in 2 novellas. The first is Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire. This is the second book in the Wayward Children series. I read the first book in this series last year and I liked but didn't love it. I already had this second book because I picked them both up secondhand a little while ago, so I figured I'll give it one more go to see if I want to continue with the series. I think honestly I was just a little bit taken aback by the tone of the first book. I wasn't expecting it to be as dark as it was and to be as much a murder mystery as it was a fantasy. I always hear it pitched as this like sweet, comfy, cozy portal fantasy, and although it definitely had elements and I can see where people are getting some of those descriptors, I didn't feel like that is what it is at its core, if that makes sense. So hopefully now with my expectations adjusted, I will enjoy this a little bit more. Can you see the pile yet? Yes, you can. It's getting nice and tall. Then we've got When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nevo. I read the first book in this series, I think it's called The Singing Hills Cycle, last month, and I really loved it, although I don't know that I really retained everything. So part of me actually wants to go back and reread that before I get into this, although I have heard that these are kind of standalones, so maybe I'll be okay if I just dive right in. Either way, they're very short and very quick to read, so I would like to read at least one of them this month. So those are my 10 books for February. The other thing I'm going to be reading is a Libro FM audiobook. As I've mentioned, I'm part of Libro FM's ALC program, which means that I get access to some new release or early release audiobooks through Libro FM every month. Now, last month, what I did was I went through and kind of made a little short list, kind of picking which ones I might like to read and kind of left it up to my mood for which one I would read throughout the month. Today I'm filming on the 1st of February and obviously Australia, our time zone, we're quite far ahead of a lot of you. So I actually haven't yet got Libro FM's list of ALCs for February yet. But I think I'll get that list before this video goes up. So these are some of the books that I've shortlisted that I might listen to this month. Basically, these are the ones that have intrigued me the most, so I'll just like write them down as options. And then when I'm in the mood for an audiobook, I can just pick one of those and enjoy it at my leisure. Hi, I'm popping in on a different day because I totally forgot a book. And that is our Blossom Book Club book for the month of February, voted on by my patrons. This month we're reading Different, Not Less by Chloe Hayden. This is a fairly new release non-fiction title and it is aimed at teens, but I'm personally really excited to be getting into it. If the name Chloe Hayden rings a bell to you at all, that is because she was Quinny in Heartbreak High. If you haven't yet watched Heartbreak High and you're up for like a very diverse, authentic, real, gritty kind of teen show, you need to check it out. It's fabulous. Chloe Hayden is an actress and activist here in Australia, and she's one of the few people who have been given the opportunity or had the opportunity to play an autistic character as an autistic person themselves. And Chloe was adamant that if she was going to play this role, she was going to have a lot of input into how Quinny and her autism were portrayed. Anyway, Chloe's basically written the book that she wishes she had as an autistic young person, sort of navigating her diagnosis and just being a teen. So I've heard great things about this one. I'm really looking forward to it, and obviously it has to be on the TBR. And I was sort of wrestling with whether I just leave it at 12 books on my TBR or if I was going to take a book off. And I think the book that I'm going to take off the TBR, at least for this month, is The Mysterious Case of the Appleton Angels by Janice Hallett. So I've already been over why I do want to read this, and I do still want to read this. I mean, who knows, maybe I will get to it in February anyway, but I just want to take the pressure off myself a little bit. It is a reasonably chunky book, and I don't know, I kind of like the idea of just picking this up when I want to, especially after not really loving the Twyford Code as much as I'd hoped. So I definitely still want to read it, I'm just not going to prioritize it in February. That's it for this little insert. I'm going to go back to Past Katey to wrap this video up for you. I've also checked on Scribd and my library, and there's quite a few of these books that I can get audio copies of, which is great for me and the kind of reader that I am. I like to have a bit of variety, both in terms of the genres and what I'm reading, but also the formats. It does feel pretty heavily skewed towards SFF. There's a lot of fantasy, a couple of sci-fi books in here. And I think normally I would try to balance that out a little bit more, add 1 or 2 contemporaries, maybe add a little bit more mystery. But there's just quite a lot of fantasy series that I do want to make progress on. So I think that any extra reading I do above and beyond this TBR will probably round that out a little bit. I did have quite a number of other books that were strong contenders for this month's list. But as I've mentioned, I don't want to make myself lists that are too ambitious and overwhelming. As with last month, I know that I probably could, and indeed I may, read a whole lot more than what is here. But I want to be very intentional about these lists, and I want to make sure that I'm not being overly ambitious, because I'm one of those people who don't work better under pressure. In fact, I work better when I feel like I'm achieving things, when I'm being affirmed, you know what I mean? So if I can tick off a bunch of these pretty early and feel like I'm ahead of my game, I will be more motivated to read more things. Whereas if I feel like I'm always one step behind, I'm just going to get stressed out by the whole process. So these are the books that I'm very much prioritizing in the month of February. And if I can get to the vast majority of them, I will be stoked. I would love to hear in the comments below what your priorities are for your reading in February, or if you've read any of these books that are on my TBR. A big thank you as always to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon for all of their support. And an especially big thank you goes to Livia, Lynette Brown, and Marie. And thank you if you've watched all the way to the end of the video. I would love to talk to you in the comments below, and I will see you again in the next video. Until then, happy reading. Bye.